Breaking news out of California. Governor Gavin Newsom just moments ago announced his plan to redraw congressional district lines in the state.
It's not complicated. We're doing this in reaction to a president of the United States that called a sitting governor of the state of Texas and said, "Find me 5 seats."
Gavin Newsom's frustration spilled out in full force when the grand plan to cement political power through a bold gerrymandering scheme unraveled before his eyes. California's governor, who had long been painted as a master tactician with a keen instinct for survival in the rough waters of national politics, suddenly found himself cornered by the very maneuver designed to strengthen his position. The anger, the disbelief, and the sheer loss of composure marked a turning point, revealing how fragile even the most carefully orchestrated strategies can become when they collide with the unpredictability of public reaction and institutional pushback. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The drama began with high ambitions. California, already a solidly Democratic state, seemed like fertile ground for an ambitious redistricting effort aimed at shoring up the party's influence for decades to come. Newsom, positioned as both the face of the state and a potential future presidential contender, took a keen interest in ensuring that the new maps reflected partisan priorities. What unfolded was a classic political gamble. On paper, the gerrymander would not only protect incumbents, but also carve out new districts designed to weaken Republican influence and cement a near-permanent majority. Yet the very confidence that fueled this strategy became its undoing. As lines were drawn too aggressively, communities were fractured, and the appearance of manipulation became impossible to ignore. From the outset, critics raised alarms. Community leaders complained that neighborhoods were split apart, weakening their collective voice. Civil rights groups argued that minority representation was being undermined under the guise of partisan strategy. Even some within Newsom's own party quietly warned that the plan might backfire by sparking a wave of backlash, not just from Republicans but from disillusioned independents and progressives who valued fairness. But in the echo chamber of Sacramento's political operatives, the focus remained on numbers, projections, and short-term advantage. The belief was that once the maps were in place, voters would eventually adjust, and the system would lock in the desired results. What Newsom underestimated was the scale of resistance. California prides itself on being a laboratory for democracy, and its citizens hold strong views about fairness and representation. Once the maps were revealed, lawsuits were filed at lightning speed. Community groups rallied in town halls, universities, and city centers, turning what might have been a dry policy matter into a populist cause. Suddenly, gerrymandering was not just a partisan tool. It was cast as an affront to California's democratic values. The narrative shifted from technical lines on a map to a story of ordinary people being stripped of their voice. That shift proved devastating for Newsom, as it painted him not as a guardian of democracy, but as a manipulator of it. As the legal challenges mounted, courtrooms became the new battleground. Judges scrutinized the maps with a sharp eye, and to the surprise of many insiders, several decisions went against the governor's camp. The aggressive nature of the redistricting stood out as a textbook case of overreach. Instead of subtle adjustments that might have gone unnoticed, the maps screamed partisanship. In ruling after ruling, judges cited evidence that the lines were drawn with explicit intent to sideline certain groups of voters. Each defeat in court chipped away at the credibility of the plan and, by extension, at Newsom's own image as a leader who prided himself on progress and fairness. The public meltdown came when the cumulative weight of these setbacks finally broke through the governor's polished exterior. Known for his composure in press conferences and his ability to pivot away from difficult questions, Newsom was visibly shaken. Reports described him lashing out at advisors, venting at legal teams, and struggling to reconcile how a strategy that once seemed bulletproof had crumbled so completely. The eruption was not just about the failure of the maps, but about the humiliation of being caught red-handed in a maneuver that undercut his brand as a reformer and progressive. For someone with national ambitions, the optics could not have been worse. Beyond the personal embarrassment, the implications of this collapse reverberated across California politics. The failure of the gerrymander emboldened opposition groups, who saw an opportunity to portray the governor as out of touch and willing to bend democratic principles for partisan gain. Republicans, though a minority in the state, seized the moment to rally their base, casting themselves as defenders of fair representation. Meanwhile, independents and moderates, key to maintaining Democratic dominance, began to voice skepticism about the party's tactics. Even among Democrats, fissures appeared as reform-minded members distanced themselves from the governor's approach, calling for independent redistricting processes that would restore trust. The timing of this debacle also amplified its consequences. With national eyes increasingly on Newsom as a potential contender for higher office, every misstep carried broader implications. Political rivals wasted no time in framing the gerrymander fiasco as proof that he could not be trusted to handle national governance. The image of a leader losing his temper over a failed power grab became fodder for critics who argued that beneath the polished speeches lay a calculating opportunist. The carefully curated persona of competence and vision collided with the raw image of a politician cornered by his own miscalculation. The collapse of the gerrymander plan also had a ripple effect on the larger conversation about democracy in California. Voters who may not have previously engaged deeply with redistricting suddenly found themselves invested in the issue. Debates erupted across the state about how to ensure fair representation and whether politicians should have any hand in drawing the lines that determine their own political fate. Grassroots movements gained momentum, pushing for reforms that would take power away from partisan actors altogether. In many ways, Newsom's misstep did more to energize reform efforts than years of quiet advocacy had achieved. What makes this episode particularly striking is how it underscored the limitations of political engineering in an age of heightened scrutiny. In decades past, gerrymandering often occurred behind closed doors, with little public awareness or outcry. But in today's media environment, every line on a map can be analyzed, shared, and debated in real time. Activists, armed with data tools and social media platforms, were able to highlight the distortions and rally opposition with unprecedented speed. Newsom's team failed to anticipate just how quickly the narrative could turn against them once the public saw the maps for themselves. The governor's eruption, while dramatic, also humanized the stakes of political miscalculation. It revealed the intense pressure leaders face when trying to balance partisan goals with the appearance of integrity. It showed how even the most skilled politicians can misjudge the moment, overplay their hand, and suffer the consequences of arrogance. For Californians, it was a reminder that vigilance is necessary to keep power in check, even when wielded by those who claim to champion democratic ideals. This moment of failure carried symbolic weight beyond the borders of California. Other states watched closely, taking note of how aggressively drawn maps can ignite backlash and legal defeat. For Democrats and Republicans alike, the lesson was clear. Gerrymandering remains a dangerous gamble, one that can backfire spectacularly if pursued too brazenly. In a political climate already fraught with debates about fairness and representation, Newsom's stumble served as a cautionary tale of what happens when ambition blinds leaders to the principles they claim to uphold. The fallout also reshaped the governor's relationship with his base. Progressives who once saw him as a champion of reform began to question his motives, asking whether he was truly committed to structural fairness or merely to partisan advantage. This skepticism threatened to erode the trust that had been key to his ability to rally diverse coalitions. While his supporters tried to downplay the episode as a tactical misstep, the visual of a leader losing composure over a failed power grab lingered in the minds of many Californians, creating doubts that no talking points could fully erase. At the heart of this unraveling was a profound irony. Newsom had built much of his reputation on pushing California as a model for democratic innovation, touting transparency, inclusion, and reform. Yet, when confronted with the temptation of securing power through map manipulation, his administration succumbed to the same practices it once decried. The exposure of that contradiction not only damaged his credibility, but also reinforced cynicism among voters already weary of political double standards. Instead of standing as a beacon of progress, the state found itself mired in the same old political gamesmanship, with its leader visibly shaken by the failure to pull it off. As observers pieced together the chain of events, one theme became undeniable. The backfire was not just about lines on a map, but about the hubris that led to their creation. The assumption that California's electorate would passively accept aggressive redistricting underestimated the intelligence and passion of the public. The belief that courts would rubber-stamp partisan designs ignored the independence of the judiciary, and the expectation that the media would focus elsewhere in a busy news cycle overlooked the growing appetite for stories that expose the misuse of power. Each miscalculation compounded the others, culminating in the spectacle of a governor losing his grip. For those who study politics, the episode provided a textbook case in overreach. It illustrated how strategies that appear airtight in theory can collapse when confronted with the messy realities of democracy. It demonstrated the dangers of conflating partisan advantage with political legitimacy, and it highlighted the unpredictable ways in which public opinion can shift, transforming what once seemed like a tactical victory into a resounding defeat. More than anything, it showed how fragile power can be when it rests on manipulation rather than trust. The image of Newsom, once so composed and forward-looking, unraveling in anger over the collapse of his gerrymander plan, will remain a defining moment in his governorship. It serves as a reminder that even in a state dominated by one party, the principles of fair representation still matter deeply to the people. It underscores that no amount of political calculation can fully control the will of a citizenry determined to hold its leaders accountable. And it reveals that the greatest threat to a politician's power is often not external opposition, but the hubris that blinds them to the limits of their own influence. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Gavin Newsom's gerrymander plan backfiring? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.